outcome of the consultation on biannual MOT testing. We're going to consider 2 SL1s and an SR subject to assembly proceedings, and 5 SL1s and 3 SRs not subject to assembly proceedings. We're going to consider a statutory instrument, the Vehicle Emissions Trading Schemes Amendment Order 2025, and we're going to consider written evidence from the Department for Infrastructure on the Eastern Transport Plan. So I'm just going to proceed through the agenda as follows. Apologies, we just have one apology from Nicola Brogan. Mark Durkin is joining us online today. Declarations of interest remind members that they are obliged to declare any relevant or financial or other interests which might reasonably be thought by others to influence their approach to the matter under consideration. Any members of interest to declare in relation to today's business should do so now when the particular matter arises during the meeting. So does any members have any interest they wish to declare? I just declare an interest in relation to my husband's family or landowners along the A5. Okay, item 3 is chairperson's business. First of all, I just want to kick off in relation to the A5. Obviously, yesterday we had a statement to the press from the Minister in relation to her being minded to bring forward an appeal to the High Court's decision. I have to say I was disappointed in the manner in which that announcement came, because it came through the media rather through any other means, and it was a sitting day. There was an opportunity to make mention of it in the Assembly chamber yesterday, or to obviously the committee as well. So I'm disappointed that the committee was not informed of that decision, but also I think there are still questions that need to be answered in relation to this. Obviously, as a committee, we did forward quite a substantial amount of questions to the department and the Minister last week in relation to the A5 and some answers that we would like to seek to provide some certainty to many of the stakeholders that are involved along the A5. And so I think today there are still more questions because it doesn't provide any certainty whatsoever for people regarding the A5. A court case, an appeal will take time, so we need to ascertain when. Obviously that's going to come to the executive, so we need to ascertain the timeline around that, and also if any other measures are going to happen as a result, or if this will be the only measure that will be considered. I know other options were discussed yesterday in the chamber by the First Minister. So are members content that we seek out some further detail and clarity in relation to that, or does anybody have any other anything else that they wish to add to that?
Yeah, Chair, just to echo those comments, and I think there the uncertainty that exists as well for the landowners and everybody involved and interested in that. The lack of clarity, and I think it's also confusion. I think that is out there. We do need to see a sense of urgency and clarity on the way forward from the Minister. Yeah, there's uncertainty for the landowners, there's uncertainty for the companies as well, because as I made mention in the chamber, even people locally with me have made mention of the fact of losing their jobs as a result of the decision as well. So there's a lot to be considered there. Mark, I'm just checking, were you looking in, or are you okay? No? Okay. Sorry, I thought I'd seen you indicating there. Okay, we'll move on. Members, just to advise that there is a standard practice to delegate authority to the chairperson and deputy chairperson during periods of recess to submit views on releasing or withholding of information of non-routine or contentious freedom of information requests that are received. So should this occur, the committee would be advised of any such requests and the views expressed by the chairperson or deputy chairperson, along with a copy of the response issued by the FOI unit at the first meeting following the recess period. So I'm just seeking agreement that members are content to continue this practice.
Content, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And then Sorry, excuse me. Also, members, you'll be aware that last week we had a meeting, an informal meeting with Logistics UK following our committee meeting, and we met just to discuss some of the issues facing the industry, and the clerks have put together a comprehensive document just of the items that were discussed, and that's at page 6. You'll see the clerk's memo of that informal meeting. There was a couple of things just arising from it, and I'm just seeking agreement that we write to the Department for Infrastructure requesting that the to check whether the department are considering the implementation of Class B driving licence derogation so that light goods vehicles can be driven on an ordinary licence. Also, that we seek some detail from the department whether they are implementing a parity of speed limits in line with the rest of the UK, and I did see there was mention of that in one item of our correspondence in relation to the school bus transport issue, so it'd be interesting to scope that out further. And then also whether the department is considering a road haulage strategy, because that strategy would tie in a number of things that were discussed during that meeting. So does any members have any other items that they want to raise or anything that they want to discuss? Cathal, you were indicating?
Oh, Chair, just to thank the staff for the note. It's a comprehensive note, and I mean, clearly it was a good enough engagement, and there's a role for us in terms of what we are responsible for. So you've outlined what approach, and I would support that approach. But it's just to say, just thank the staff for the note, and hopefully we'll try and get some answers. I think there's some good ideas. Even the attachments, reading some of the attachments and the strategies that give, so the department may have some of that, but they can learn from that. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I'm happy enough with your approach, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah. Keith?
I see a point in here, decarbonisation. What was the bones of that? I know you've put on a point of it. Are they stating that the net zero targets are not achievable?
So I think coming from the conversation, they're obviously concerned about decarbonisation and the impact that that will have on fleets and the fleet size.
Price of the fleets and challenge.
Yeah, and the fuel prices as well, and what that will mean for their industry. And that's something that has come up a wee bit in relation to some of the evidence that we have taken, just in terms of the cars technology is a bit further on.
Electric vehicle stuff
Yeah.
and all that come up,
Yeah.
so that's part of that conversation.
Yeah, and just, that's a concern for them. Do you want to raise that with the Minister, Keith, as well, just to see?
No, I'm just saying here that a diesel vehicle 110. I see these notes you put in here,
Yeah.
and an ordinary electric vehicle is 300,000. There's a massive difference there.
Absolutely.
Well, do you want to maybe raise with them? And I think it's worthwhile you raising that point.
Yeah.
Do you want to check with the Minister, with the department, to
Yeah.
see if there's any plans in terms of supporting the industry in that move, particularly obviously when we're looking at vehicle emissions trading scheme and that type of thing as well, and particularly how fleets.
Because if
fall
they're going to meet
into
the
that.
targets, they're going to need assistance, because that's not financially viable to do it
Yeah,
as it sits there.
yeah. Well, we can add that too. Was anybody else looking in? No. Okay. Sorry.
Are members content that we write to the just to get confirmation that there's agreement amongst members? Right, yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Content, yeah.
Okay, draft minutes is item 4. At page 11, you'll see the draft minutes of proceeding on the meeting on the 25th of June. So I'm just seeking agreement that members are content that the minutes are a true and accurate reflection of the meeting on the 25th of June. If so, I'll sign the minutes now. Content. Thank you. Super, thank you.
And there's just concurrent ones as well. Check.
And sorry, just the concurrent.
They've already been approved by the
They've
committee.
been approved. So these have been approved by the committee. This was the concurrent meeting on the 3rd of June, which was in the Senate chamber. And just I'm formally signing the minutes if all's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So item 5 is matters arising. So does anyone have any matters arising from the previous meeting? No? Okay. We'll move on to our... Sorry.
Apologise. When do we expect a response back on the questions that was asked of the Minister?
I'll follow up with that.
And we'll get that out then
It'll be sent out to members as soon as we get the response. Yeah.
Yeah, so we had indicated for today's meeting, that wasn't possible, and obviously some of that has moved on a wee bit as well with yesterday. I did indicate that the committee would all be informed of the responses whenever they're received, because obviously it will be over the summer. So for fairness and transparency to everybody, I've asked that the committee is all informed of what response comes back from the department, just in relation to that. Sorry, Andrew.
Just a quick point, Chair. Just last Thursday, I attended the climate and flooding thing in Craigavon, organised by the department, and just it was really, really useful, very, very interesting. So, just if anybody does get the chance, those roundtable events, just to thank the department for putting it on, and just encourage people because it was very useful, I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think as a committee we did with those round tables, I think have asked before just that the committee get some information, I think just on conclusion of some of that as well, because you remember we had some of the planning information as well. So yeah, perfect. Anybody else? No? Okay. Item 6 is correspondence. So at page 21 you'll see the correspondence memo. At page 36 you'll see ministerial response to committee correspondence regarding road safety on school buses. So I just refer members as well to correspondence from the department at page 11 of the table papers on how infringement of safety regulations is enforced. And it might be worthwhile obviously as this continues, just checking in relation to some of the elements of it. Did anybody want to raise anything on that? No? Okay. At page 43 you'll see a ministerial response to committee correspondence regarding pedestrianisation of Hill Street. So again, we haven't got the stakeholder list, so again, if we could just get the update in relation to who all is engaged in that process, if you're content with that. Yeah. Okay, page 44 you'll see ministerial response to the committee correspondence regarding Bournemouth at Castle Rock, Port Stewart. So I'm seeking agreement that we write to the Minister, thanking her for the correspondence, but also asking how much the repairs will cost and where the money will come from, because I did note in the correspondence that it will be up against other infrastructure projects, but it seems like quite an emergent and urgent issue in relation to what's happening at the Bournemouth here in this area. So we just need to find out where that money is going to come from, because I think I'd seen media reports that it would be around 1.2 million, I think the business case was. So just to check around the costings of that, if you're content. Okay, at page 45 you'll see ministerial response to committee correspondence regarding the A5 Western Transport Corridor. Obviously, as we've discussed, the committee has written to the Minister asking a range of questions on the A5, and those responses will be sent to the committee during the summer recess period. Okay.
Sure, sorry, just on that, we may well be coming to it, but what about an update from the senior officials on the A5, as soon as we get back? Is that still the plan, or?
That was contained within the, we have asked for them to come to the committee. So there's nothing further at this moment in time. They weren't available to come today. The request was that they would come either as soon as possible or to the committee today. So
it'll be important when we come back.
Yeah.
ASAP.
Yeah. We'll need to play it by ear over the summer too.
I know, see what happens.
Because
it's all right, Chair. Don't worry about it. I'll call you. Trust me.
So
over the summer.
So we're obviously keeping a watch and brief on it as well. So. Okay, at page 64 you'll see correspondence from the Committee for Finance regarding the Administrative and Financial Provisions Bill consultation. So the committee has asked that we give our views in relation to clause 17, which is the power to charge a fee for a travel concessionary pass. So I'm just seeking agreement that we write to DFI seeking its views, but also in relation to, I was looking at this clause myself as well, what's the full extent of that power, just for clarity in relation to that? Will those charges be in line with inflation? Will they be reviewed over a period of time for the department if that clause is to be introduced, because we're talking about some of our most vulnerable here in society in terms of pensioners and that type of thing. So we just have to make sure that it's fair in terms of cost for them. Are members content with that approach?
Right, Chair.
Yeah. At page 102, you'll see correspondence from the Committee for Finance regarding the Northern Ireland Fiscal Council Bill consultation. So I'm just informing you that this will move the council from a non-statutory to a statutory basis. So does anyone have any views on the bill? No? Okay. Content then to note.
Yep.
At page 131, there's correspondence from the Committee for the Executive Office regarding the inquiry, Mother and Baby Institutions, Magdalene Laundries and Workhouse and Redress Scheme Bill. So does any members have any views on the bill? No? Okay. We'll note them. At page 258, there's correspondence from the Wastewater Infrastructure Group providing a joint position paper on the wastewater infrastructure produced by the Northern Ireland Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Construction Employers Federation and Northern Ireland Federation of Housing Associations. So obviously this adds to the body of evidence that we as a committee have accumulated on the funding options for wastewater. So are there any aspects that members want to query or question, or are you content to note at this stage?
Content, Chair. Well, I'm content.
Content to note, yeah. Okay, and then at page 258, you'll see correspondence from Peter McReynolds MLA regarding his private members' tree protection bill. So I'm just seeking agreement that we invite the member. It's a bit strange whenever you're in the room.
Chair, I would say it's like it's the last day, like. Okay.
So-
Okay, man, I had paid so
So,
Don't terrify me, just terrify me.
so obviously we have had requests from other members before asking to come to present to the committee with their private members' bill, but I'm just seeking agreement that we invite you at a opportune time whenever finalised proposals and everything are in place. Is everybody content with that? I might have to be there
Bring
someday
bodyguards
too.
with him. Okay, yeah, that's fine, Chair. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then tabled at page 15 is correspondence from Into the West requesting the opportunity to present to the committee on issues regarding rail west of the Bann River. So I'm just seeking agreement that we request a written paper with a view to arranging an oral evidence session, because it is important just to check in relation to activity there for rail in the west. So are members content with that?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Does any members have any other comments or any issue that they want to raise coming out of the correspondence? We maybe haven't mentioned there? No? Okay, so just seeking agreement then that members are content to note the remaining actions in the correspondence pack?
Great, Chair.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, we're now moving on to item 7, which is outcome of the consultation on biannual MOT testing, Department for Infrastructure oral evidence. At page 327, you'll see the clerk's memo. At page 330, you'll see the outcome of the consultation on biannual MOT testing, Department for Infrastructure oral evidence. So we welcome back to the committee today Dr. Chris Hughes, Director, Driving Vehicle and Road Safety Policy Division, Department for Infrastructure, and Dorcas Catrona, Governance and Vehicle Policy Projects Branch, Department for Infrastructure. You're very welcome to the committee today. It's lovely to see you. And we're looking forward to hearing from you in relation to biannual testing. So, as per usual, if you don't mind, 5 minutes just to brief the committee. I know we're probably at the starting blocks in relation to this, so we'll probably see you again in relation to this issue, but brief opening of 5 minutes, and then I'll come to members' questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see everybody again, and we will keep this very brief and conscious as well. It's your final day, and we don't want to delay anyway. So thank you for the opportunity, Chair and committee members, to brief us on this. So the Minister has said she is very keen at this stage to hear the views of elected representatives. So we're very much, we will give you the information we can that you seek from us if we have it. We're also very, very keen to hear what you have to say. So, and just to be aware, Chair, as you alluded, this is part of the process that we're going through, so we're far from the end. We've done a gathering of evidence through from a consultation. We are also now getting those cars that had temporary exemption certificates issued to them now coming back into the MOT system. So we actually have live data that will become available through this summer and beyond about cars that have not been required of an annual test. So that will be information that we will be able to bring to members and to this issue. So we're on part of a journey. On this, the consultation, there was a good response, 1,400 responses. The synopsis for this is that the views on it from the consultation are strongly split. Okay, they're also contradictory as well as being strongly split. So on road safety, the blue lights, the automotive industry, professionals, businesses are very concerned that moving to biennial will have a detrimental impact on road safety. The public, 2/3 believe that it will have no impact or will improve road safety. Now, briefly then, I'm going to pass over to Dorcas, who will just run you through the other contradictory bit, which is about the financial implications of what the moving to biennial would be.
Okay. There's around 80% of the responses were in favour of biennial, but the reasons they cited for being in favour were initially they thought they would get an MOT test quicker. They also thought that they would save money on servicing and car maintenance costs, which currently there's around 91% of people through the consultation said that they service a car annually. This then reason for potentially saving money, 44% of people said they would save money. So that would maybe lead you to think that maybe wouldn't service their car as often. The automotive industry, people like mechanics and stuff, also said that with biennial, potentially they might have to increase their servicing costs because they were using sort of the time around COVID as an example, in that they saw a lot of cars coming forward then that hadn't been, the people were obviously saving on parts and maybe servicing their cars less often. And now there's various reasons for that through COVID. It's not just around the testing, you know, it can just be like there was behavioural kind of changes then, and car parts not being available and things, so it's not just quite as straightforward. Insurance as well, the people who are in favour and those who are not in favour of biennial have all said they're not prepared to pay higher insurance premiums. And the insurance bodies, we contacted 3 insurance bodies who speak for various companies across the UK, and they have all said there is a very strong likelihood that insurance premiums will increase because the way they base their insurance premiums on risk, and they think they think there's always a number of, you know, on-road worthy cars on the roads, but with an annual MOT they're kind of maybe potentially found at a quicker stage, where biennial it would be at the 24 months.
Okay, super, thank you very much. And look, this is obviously there's a lot of vested interest here. You know, particularly we all drive on the road, and this is too for the public, and that's where I kick off, because I find it very interesting, you know, that the majority obviously were individual responses. So do you feel that this maybe then obviously skews the results from a departmental point of view, and how do you square that circle really? Because, you know, I've noticed obviously that you've said there's umbrella groups and they have significance beyond some of the responses. So are you adding particular weighting to some of those groups as opposed to members of the public who would have fed into the consultation process?
So the approach that you would take, so this is my former statistician head coming on here, so the approach you would take to there was 1,396,
99.
94 people who actually wrote in through the online response. From the likes of the PSNI, we got a single written response. So that, obviously there's 6,500 PSNI officers. That doesn't reflect the view of individually. But if you look at, so we basically 1,400 individual members of the public, but we had trade representatives. So whenever you're doing it, and in my introduction, Chair, I actually broke that down to say, look, here's the blue lights and the automotive industry and the industry representatives. So we do recognise that. Now, there's not a particular way that you would do a weighted thing. You know, you're not going to get a number that comes out on that. This is a judgment. So, you know, those who know about the industry have concerns about road safety. The general public think, well, that sounds like a good idea and it will save me money, but I'm not, even though my insurance will go up, I'm not prepared to pay more for insurance. So that's what I said, it's contradictory within the thing. So we will manage it that way by being explicit about the different interest groups and those who are knowledgeable about it, rather than doing numbers game on it. Essentially, the people who responded on Citizen Space, they represent the general public. In there are mechanical people who are mechanics stuff. We can separate them out, but that's the approach that we will be taking.
Okay, and then you'd said obviously about the TECs, and there's live data now that's coming that will inform obviously biannual testing, because TECs are essentially biannual testing right now.
Yes.
And so, but TECs haven't been a new thing really in Northern Ireland. Yes, relatively new, but this isn't the first time that we have had the temporary exemptions around COVID and things like that. So are you using that data as well to help inform, or is it just the TECs, the current stream, if you want to put it that way?
We're sort of using both. We're going to use both. I mean, when you look back at COVID, sort of general pass rates for cars currently are sitting around 80%. And sort of maybe before COVID, it would have maybe sat around the previous year before COVID was a very high rate, and it sat around 82%. Around COVID times, it dropped to around 77%. So we will, you know, compare and contrast the information that's happening now with they're just the cars that have current TECs are just starting to be MOT'd.
Yeah.
So it'll take a few months for that, and you know. Back for the failures were, you know, back in during COVID, cars were failing. The kind of issues were broken lights, tread on tires, brakes, some stuff around suspension, and that was through the DVA failure kind of reasons. Also, that was supported by mechanics' views as well, and some of their kind of responses back.
Do you think that there's, you know, that's it's interesting, because I know from my own perspective, if I have an MOT test coming up, I make sure that my car is ready for MOT. Do you think there needs to be a wee bit of a public awareness campaign, you know, around what an MOT actually is, you know, what that actually means? Because, you know, it's clear then, you know, people have taken a bit of a lax attitude.
Yeah. Around 91% of responses of people who responded to consultation said that they currently service their car every year, whether it's in advance of their MOT, but they said that they provide or they service their car once a year. That, you know, the kind of was contradicted then by the people maybe then thinking that they would save money perhaps by not servicing their car every year, the 44%. Yeah. But at this point, through the consultation, it was 91%.
And also, I mean, that's always something that's well worth considering. So absolutely. We did ask people specifically about their understanding of the MOT currently. Mm-hmm. So 99% of people said that they understand that the MOT means that the car is fit to be driven on the road at that point in time. We also had 99% who said that they understood that that didn't mean that the car would remain worthy until the next road test. So so there was a strong understanding, it appears. Now, if we go to change that, obviously we would need to look at what we do to inform that. But right now, the understanding of what it does and how it fits in an annual cycle seems to be very strong.
Okay, and then I just wanted to check, has there been any figures to prove that there's been an increase in, for example, RTCs in other places where biannual testing is in place, and particularly even, I suppose, in terms of Northern Ireland? I know we're looking at the data at this moment in time with TECs being in place, but has there been anything to sort of indicate that there has been an increase in incidences as a direct result of this?
We don't have any data that relates specifically to Northern Ireland. I have some information that, and just gathering information that actually came from the World Health Organization. And they have a chart on the European countries set against fatality rate per 100,000 inhabitants, and their roadworthiness testing systems in place. So the UK, including Northern Ireland, have the lowest fatality rate at 2.4% of against fatalities. Southern Ireland has the next, it's 2.8, but then other countries around, like France, who have biennial in place, they're 4.7. Italy is 5. Portugal 7.2. So they all have biennial in place, but they're, the figures might suggest that there is potentially a link between biennial roadworthiness, but we don't have any kind of specific figures for Northern Ireland.
Okay. And then just in terms of what discussions may be happening with the Department of Justice, for example, because obviously with biannual testing potentially being in place, roadworthiness of cars, how that is monitored with policing and resourcing for unroadworthy vehicles. Has there been any discussions as yet with the Department of Justice, or I suppose the police in their response as well to the consultation?
The police you've engaged with?
Yeah, we met with the police before the consultation just to kind of get some information from them, and then they provided a response. Now, they are not in favour of biennial, and they have strong concerns around road safety. They also mentioned their resources, in that their resources are at an all-time low. So in recent times, they have been able to do less, like roadside checks, to spot issues around, broken lights and bald tires and things like that. And the information they gave us at that time was that going forward, they don't think they'll be in a position to, if biennial was introduced, potentially to up the number of roadside checks.
And on your specific question about the Department of Justice, no, we haven't. We would engage with the Department of Justice maybe around things like to do with changing sentencing guidelines and stuff like that, but this isn't where we're at on this, and it's still the operationalisation of it is the PSNI, and we have sought their views on it. So
Okay, I'm now going to move to other members. Deputy Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, folks, for coming along. It's a really interesting survey, I think, and some conflicting information. I suppose that the Minister is, and it's great to hear that she's looking at members' feedback. For me, first and foremost, is road safety. It is absolutely paramount, and to that end, in my head, I do weight the responses from the PSNI and from the experts in the fields. Interesting that 90% of people who responded as individuals said that they serviced their car annually and looked after it, but that means a significant minority don't. And we know that around 20 to 25% of cars fail their MOT when they go for MOT, which says to me they hadn't even bothered getting it ready for MOT, so they were driving within a car that wasn't fit for the road. And I assume if that mentality was carried on, would continue to do so for another year until they use the MOT system to get a quick £30 check on what they needed then. So
14%. Sorry for interrupting you. 14% of people through the responses agree with what you're saying.
Yeah. And
we're honest about
unfortunately, we need to make the rules based on, unfortunately, the worst offenders, the people who are going to cause the most trouble. And the police have said that. So clearly, even those who are meant to have their cars roadworthy aren't. Interesting as well, that 72%, as you said, of people who favoured it going to 2 year wouldn't pay more in insurance. And I think we can all agree that if insurance companies see any opportunity whatsoever, as they invariably do, at any opportunity to stick the premiums up, they will do, and that's borne out. So I'm just interested. So you talked about the police resources. Clearly, they don't. There's no way they would have, as far as in that feedback, the extra resources to do the spot checks that they required. That's what they've said as well. Yeah, Chair, I don't have any additional questions at this stage because it's just. But I'd look forward, I think, mainly to that data coming from the 2 years, just to see when will that be published.
It'll take time. The DVA publish stats sort of every quarter, and they're usually a quarter behind in arrears, you know, we will ask for an indication from them just whenever we're presenting information to the minister.
Okay.
But I don't think it'll be, you know, in the public domain for potentially maybe not to the end of this year.
So we'll need, I mean, they're only starting to come into the system
Yeah.
right now. So the TECs, I think, came in May or June. So we're only starting to have the vehicles in. So we'll need a little bit of time to gather. DVA are specifically going to analyse those cars, so there will be a specific analysis done on those cars. And the longer we wait, the more months we will have. But I mean, within a couple of months, hopefully we'll be able to see quickly as to whether there's a marked shift or whether things are similar. So there's a part of me doesn't know because I don't know what the data is going to tell me.
Yeah, of course.
If it's a big difference, then we'll need less time if it's more subtle. So, but over the course of this, we will be collecting. There'll come a point whenever we will go, right, we've got what we have, and that will be fed into the process. So that will become part of the mix.
Okay.
So
There was one question I was going to check. Is there anywhere at all that does testing by mileage, or is that far too burdensome for the system?
We haven't come across, we did check that out before we went to consultation, and we haven't come across anywhere. The reason we think is that there is no official record where like the public or any vehicle owners have to record officially what their mileage is, you know, things through maybe insurance, and even with the at your MOT your mileage is recorded, but for insurance it's all optional. So there's nowhere to, and then DVA don't record the mileage of your car either, so there's nowhere official that you can monitor. I mean, they have that information, but it's not presented anywhere.
I need to double check, but my understanding is that they don't have a right. So if I'm getting my my car MOT in 2 days.
Okay.
And it's being serviced now, so all very live. But when you go, they say, "Oh, and would you mind reading that out?"
Yes.
So they ask you, "Are you content to give it to them?" But they don't. I think they don't have a right to capture it.
Okay.
So I think we could get back on that, but I mean that's my understanding is
It's recorded though on when you get your MOT certificate.
recorded on
The mileage is there, and then your service log, which I don't know if it's a legal requirement, but records each service.
Yeah, we did some checking with GB around things like that, and they had, well, it was all anecdotal kind of evidence around like fraud, mileage, speedometer, what do you call them? Clocking, yes. So
yeah.
look at me, the bad boy.
There's one of them in every car now,
there
just
was
in
kind of
case.
some issues around that when looking at, potentially looking at miles.
The short answer is nobody's managed to make that work as a
Right,
mechanism.
okay.
I mean, I think your service logs tells you if you want to keep your
Yes.
service or your 7-year guarantee or whatever up to date, you need to service it every so many miles or distance, but it doesn't read through into the MOT system as far as where we are
The
anyway.
insurance companies ask you for a rough assessment. Presumably, if you go over it, then they probably won't pay you out as well, knowing them. But it would be my take on it. Sure, thank
Yeah,
you.
it's interesting. Cahill?
Thanks, Chair. I love this subject too. I have to ask this question now, and I know you may or may not have asked it. Now, you've said that people get the car serviced, which is correct. Are we accepting that a car service is more comprehensive than an MOT test?
I would say
No,
not.
the only reason being is because anybody who get the car serviced, most would know what that involves, to be honest, compared to what an MOT is. In terms of, car services, check the brakes, brake fluid, oil and all those things, and engine purposes. They're not put on a ramp and shook all. Do you know what I mean? I'm only saying, that it's grand people saying you have a lot of data there in terms of servicing the car, which is correct. And it's all about road safety. And I just asked it in that context. It's not an argument for or against. It's about people understanding exactly what an MOT is about and what road safety is about.
So the short answer is no. Whenever you get your car serviced, that does not guarantee that you will pass an MOT. And in fact, every time I leave my mechanic, he says, "No, that doesn't mean it's going to pass the MOT." He actually says that.
No, fair enough. I'm only saying for the.
But
for
you're
the
absolutely right.
The physicality of an MOT test is slightly different. And that's all. You know what I mean?
There's computer tests and there's admissions tests and there's a whole range of things that
Because
that it
your
does
car's
that
MOT
doesn't
for the day that you get it passed.
It is, yeah.
It's not necessarily
So,
MOT
yeah.
for the next day. Let's be honest. So my question is really around some of the stuff. Interestingly, the likes of the PSNA and the road safety groups are very concerned.
Yeah.
Clearly, the biggest percentage is that. Where does that qualify? I mean, in relation to their stats in terms of road traffic collisions, or is there detailed data out there to qualify that?
So putting my wider road safety hat on here, members will be aware that the greatest cause of road traffic collisions is human error. Okay, that's just what it is. Now, that obviously is exacerbated by a vehicle that's not maintained in a roadworthy condition. So if the PSNI are recording the cause of a collision, they will, for example, say pulling out from a road without due care and attention, incorrect position on the road. That car could have problems with it, but that's not recorded as the major thing. So whenever you look at the reasons being recorded, which are mechanical failure, it's less than 1%. I think popping into my head is about 0.3%. But one of the major concerns that the road safety organisations have is that because people's attitudes are what underpins collisions, the less emphasis that you put on road safety and people view MOTs as part of the road safety suite of measures that are, then that de-emphasises the need to take care of road safety issues. So that is one of their concerns.
And that was my second question, really. It's a bit responsibility of the road owner, or the car owner, sorry, to ensure, and probably that's one of the major things to do. The other one is it's interesting you talked about insurance premiums. I mean, how is it working anywhere else that does biennials in terms of premiums?
Honest answer is that I'm not sure. We've tried to get some information from some other European countries, but we haven't been able to source that. The discussions we had with three of the big bodies, they said that insurance premiums are set on risk, and that that they believe then that, you know, the kind of safety check sort of lengthening to 24 months rather than 12 months increases risk.
So I would, as one of my roles, meet the industry representative bodies, and they're very careful about commercial and confidence. So, you know, they, for their own reasons, will not share that information, and that's how it is. They're commercial businesses. They're regulated by the FCA. They're not under our control in that respect, but they know exactly what the fatality rate is annually in Northern Ireland. They know that. They can tell you that when you meet it. They know exactly how many collisions there are. They know exactly how many people are seriously injured. They are across every single bit of that data. They are concerned about anything that de-emphasises road safety in general, because it then leads into more collisions. So they take that. They haven't expressed it this way, but my take on it is that they take that view. They know our data inside and out. So they're very much looking at this particular market, and there is a concern about the market.
Yeah, the choice of insurance providers, insurance brokers, companies is less in Northern Ireland than it is in GB, and the insurance bodies said that potentially there, you know, some insurance companies could pull out of Northern Ireland, so it would potentially reduce then the number of insurance companies available to.
So we still have no data, because we know in the south the biennial test, so there's still no data, and it's just something you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean we did check one of the comparison sites for down south, and their insurance, it's quite similar to ours, but not, you know, it was hard to stand over the information.
It's a broader conversation.
Yeah.
The very fact it's raised a number of things. I mean,
yeah.
Obviously the industry, and you've the Blue Light Brigade, you have the road safety groups, and they have their own, and fair enough, and that's where the debate lies. That's what, you know. The other point then is just, say in terms of the temporary exemptions, is there any evidence to suggest that because we've issued those, is there any correlation between road safety or implications for road safety in relation to that? It's too early to say, is it really?
Yeah, and those figures, I mean, the figures that we haven't seen, so we're running about 70 fatalities a year in or around at the moment here in the north. So we have seen nothing that has, you know, there hasn't been a long enough data that, and the way they're recorded and stuff like that, and there's always a time lag in the NISR statistician, so we have no evidence of any change. But I wouldn't have expected that to be available, you know, in the time that we've had.
Absolutely,
so,
no, and it's just to throw it in there, because that's what we're doing live at the minute, and I mean, it would form part of the discussion.
Yes,
to be honest
it'll be
with
available
when we go around.
I think even thinking back to whenever TECs were in place as well, there's you know, whenever the PSNI are recording reasons, you know, they don't check if a car has a Did not.
No, and that's
TEC,
fair enough. To be
yeah.
fair, that's
Yeah.
reasonable enough. It's just suppose it's been brought up as part of it. It's
Yeah.
a good enough discussion to have.
Oh, it is.
And there's a lot of good information there. You know, it's important we have all the data, so there's an informed decision there when we come to it. I mean, you know, and I think it's reasonable enough. But sure, I'll leave it at that. I could talk about it all day. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Super, thank you. Before I move on, one omission that I forgot to mention, but I think it's okay. I'm just seeking agreement that we can record the evidence by Hansard. We're halfway through, but
I don't want everything that's done with the road. Sure, just on that matter, about I suppose could a bit of clarity on the policing board, just in case,
Yeah.
because some of that stuff in terms of road safety.
yeah,
So,
no, that's
just as a member of
100%.
council,
Okay, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, folks, for your presentation. It was very interesting work indeed. I suppose I'm just keen to go back to the origins and sort of genesis of why you are started down the road of the biannual thing. Was it the case that our MOT centres were struggling to cope with demand and capacity issues? Is that part of the why we're where we are?
So I suppose so. That would be part of the mix. So there was I think it was in that context. So, and I think some of the members around the table, literally and virtually, were part of that discussion. So seeing Mark smile there. So that was brought by elected representatives to the attention of the minister, who then took a decision to explore it as an option. I think would probably be a fair way of
that's
describing
okay.
that.
And then obviously the TECs, I think, have been a helpful tool. Certainly it's made the experience for all of us and for residents of booking an appointment obviously easier. We're all getting contacted by that. Are you content with where that is at the minute as a department in terms of appointment times for the public?
So the appointment times have reduced since did you have the figures, Dorcas?
Just in recent, haven't got them here, but just from recent memory, they were originally sitting around 100 days, and in recent months they have dropped now. People can get appointments within 30 days max.
Yes. Yeah, no, there has been an improvement, certainly. And, it's been
and then also there will be the 2 new test centres opening as well, which will improve capacity by significant by around 200,000.
Yeah, and the TECs then, just remind me, are they coming to an end, or will they continue until a decision has been taken on this?
I wouldn't have information on that. We'd need to go back and work that through. So
Okay. And just going back then to the consultation, has there been any change from the most recent feedback in terms compared to the 2021 call for evidence that the work was done? Obviously that time was difficult with COVID and so on, but has there been any
We had a
noticeable-
bigger response this time around, but the sort of the trends were similar. The only sort of difference was that there was this time around we only had one motoring organisation respond, where the previous times, now we did reach out to them and ask them to respond, but they didn't seem to take such a great interest this time.
probably the biggest difference was that whenever we did the call for evidence, the insurance industry sort of stayed its hand a wee bit and went, well, this is a call for evidence. They were very engaged in keeping an eye on it. In this, they have been much firmer about the fact that they would expect that they will be increasing insurance costs as a result of it. That would be the main difference I would have spotted between the two. A firming up of the insurance position on that.
And we had more, the automotive industry, like trade organisations and things. We had a big response from them, and they put a lot of detailed information into the responses, like just their view on things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, obviously you mentioned insurance. I think that's a major concern for so many people out there. And the Motor Insurance Task Force, for example, has there been any consultation done with them around any of this, or have they been involved?
I know our department has been in contact with them, but not through as part of this consultation.
So the Motor Insurance Task Force is being headed up by the Minister for Finance, and our Minister is, I think, an interested party, but I don't know where that sits at the moment. But what we do know is that this is an industry that makes commercial decisions. And it's under the FCA, so I wouldn't be able to add much detail.
Okay, and just finally, just in terms of time frame then, for the way forward on this, have you any indication of?
Well, I can tell you what steps we have to do. So obviously we will take away the feedback from yourselves and make that as part of the process. We will then, as I was saying to Mr. Stewart, look at how long we get to look at the data that's coming in from the TEC. So we will need to finish analysing the consultation, and then get the additional information that's coming in from the TECs, and then that position will be able to provide advice to the minister. So we're at that stage on the process. So to an extent, it's, you know, we need to see what the TECs are telling us, but that's the stage we're at. The consultation is now, the analysis is ongoing. We're able to give you sort of reasonable indication of what it says, and the minister will then get advice, and then it's for her to take a decision.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Peter?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to touch upon the concerns that were mentioned by the blue lights. Is that based on evidence, and is data mentioned in their responses, or is that mostly anecdotal concerns that they present?
There is a limited amount of data. They were able to give us some figures, but it wasn't a significant amount of figures. They were able to give us some information, but it was probably the most recent stuff was maybe from a year or so ago.
And then Chris, just touching upon the answer that you'd said to Cahill. Maybe I misheard you. Are you suggesting there's a link between lack of maintenance of your vehicle and maybe lack of MOTs and RTCs? Is that what the data's saying?
So what we do know is that human error is the cause of collisions. Yeah. Okay, and driving without due care and attention is one of those major causes of collisions, and particularly fatalities. So there's an attitude about being road safe, and as part of that general principle, I'm speculating that it may be that if you do not attend to making sure your car is roadworthy, might that read across into the actions that you take. So there's no hard evidence. That's not that kind of a link. But I'm saying that it could well be that, because we know we are tussling with human behaviour, and that is one of the big issues that we're dealing with. Now, we do know that the international evidence is quite clear that for those countries that, I'm talking more broadly here about road safety and road safety messaging, we do know that those countries where there is an expectation that if you infringe any road safety laws that you will be caught, have far lower rates of collisions and and so the example is Sweden, for example. If you reside in Sweden, you can expect to be breathalyzed at least once a year if you're not in a target group. If you are in a target group, it will be much more frequent than that. As a result, people expect that if they drink and drive, they will get caught, and therefore they don't drink and drive. So there is an element there where the behaviour is driven by the actions that are taken. So that link is, I can't say that will definitely lead to that by 10%, but what I can say is that the blue lights in particular are concerned that as part of the conversation around us taking responsibility for our own safety on the roads, and particularly for the safety of other people, the whole message could be diluted by what could be perceived as a de-emphasis on road safety, care and maintenance of your vehicle.
I would say as well, I'm on the policing board too.
Okay.
So in terms of that response from the PSNI, what sort of level of detail do they go into? I always remember, you just reminded me of something. I did a ride along with the police recently, and they said the best time to sort of test vehicles is like 3 a.m. It's the unreasonable person test, because no one should be out at 3 a.m. So there's a resourcing implication. Was that mentioned within their response, or was it very much so sticking to?
No, they I just have a few points here. So they did talk about their lack of resources or decreasing resources. So they said that obviously had an impact on the amount of roadside checks that could be completed. There wasn't an issue around time. Let me see here. Common defect. Yeah, they told us about the kind of common defects that they see on when they're doing it. So things like tire wear and tear, braking system deterioration. They think that basically that those kind of things can significantly deteriorate over a year if people don't give them due regard. They also mentioned that currently with the annual system, it's like that the public kind of perception and compliance, that everyone knows they have their annual MOT, so that it's 12 months and not 24 months, so that they potentially might be more compliant.
Okay. And then just lastly, in terms of that World Health Organization data that you had mentioned with I think was it 2.4% for the UK and Northern Ireland, and then 2.8% in the South.
Yeah.
So it's not percent, it's
deaths
per 100,000 miles.
Okay.
Fatalities per 100,000 miles, yeah.
In terms of other countries though, within Europe or maybe across the world, were there other countries just hovering around there, or do we, that 4.7, that 5, for Italy and France. Is that the other extreme of the scale, or is that what can you expand?
Well,
on that?
the next, I'm just looking here, 2.4 for UK, 2.8 for Ireland. The next one up would be Spain at 3.5. So it's a sort of a reasonable jump from there. Or sorry, Germany's 3.3. So and then the highest would be Portugal at 7.2. So it's sort of a range in between.
The data was Western Europe, wasn't it, really, that we looked at?
Yeah.
So it was Western Europe, because we know internationally when you go, so high-income countries have far fewer collisions than low-income countries. That's,
And this was for fatalities, it wasn't just
Yeah.
RTCs.
So we're measuring like with like here, so it's fatalities per 100,000 kilometres
Does
travelled.
that data, and obviously the South has biennial testing,
Mm-hmm.
does that data take into account rural fatalities, or did it expand upon that?
No,
or
it didn't expand on it at all.
No worries. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Mark's online.
Off mute.
There we go.
Okay, thank you, Chair. You were keeping me muted there inadvertently.
I would never mute you, Mark.
I hope not. Thanks to the guys for coming in. That's been a very interesting evidence session. I think it's fair to say there's no huge surprises with regard to the consultation responses, and they do very much mirror responses to the previous call for evidence. Now, we as a party had been pushing this issue, more so to push some sort of action in terms of improving efficiency in the system, and it's fair to say that subsequent to that we've seen the introduction of TECs and have seen huge improvements in terms of I suppose availability of appointments and that for MOTs. Like, the weight is a way down, and maybe it's not fair to ask you guys, but in terms of the amount of money being spent by the department or TVA on MOT centres, has that reduced any?
That's outside our bailiwick, I'm afraid. I just wouldn't have any data that I could offer on that at all. Sorry.
Yeah, if memory serves me correctly from a previous session with people whose bailiwick it was,
Yes, Jeremy.
It hadn't, and obviously, like, no one wants to do anything that will compromise road safety or increase risk on our roads. But when these concerns are so great, we've still gone ahead with the temporary exemption certificates. Do you know what I mean? So have they been set aside? The issue around insurance companies and their, I suppose, mastery of all the detail, Chris, as you were saying, I'm sure they're looking. I don't want to plant the seed with them, that's for sure, but they must have been looking at TECs, and have we seen fluctuation in insurance costs for cars of that certain age when they're granted a temporary exemption certificate?
We
wouldn't know.
Yeah, we don't have any
Wouldn't have that
information on
data.
that. I think the insurance companies were looking at TCs in their nature that they're temporary.
Yeah.
But they didn't discuss that whenever I engaged with them and met with them.
It's
They
a fair
didn't
point.
discuss that with me at all.
And how long can they be temporary for? Do you know, how long can the department hold this position of, okay, we're going to roll this out again and again? Because the fear would be, or concern would be, it has to be described as a concern rather than a fear, because a fear is about loss of life, but a concern would be that when it's done away with, that we go back to where we were.
So obviously that's a decision that would need to be taken at the appropriate time, and the rationale behind a temporary exemption certificate is, as it literally says, it's temporary and therefore it's time bound. And the reason why a temporary exemption certificate is the legislation requires there to be exceptional circumstances. So by definition, that needs to be in there for the rationale for a temporary exemption certificate to be granted. The last ones were granted on the basis that there was an issue to do with the bringing on the line the MOT centres. So phrase myself carefully here. So there was an issue to do with that, and that issue was going to be addressed and resolved. So it was a time-bound issue. So that was determined to be so. Whenever the period for the temporary exempt, a new decision would need to be taken. So that I haven't engaged with. So, but that is, your point is absolutely spot on. That's how they are. So, each one needs to be, each one is time bound, and a new temporary exemption certificate decision would need to be taken.
On same or different exceptional
A judgment would need to be made. Yeah.
No, I think the information that we do need to see is that's been collated from this current cohort of vehicles who've availed of a TEC, because any supposed change in legislation or policy has to be evidence-based. So the more evidence that we can get, the better. And that's why a couple of other people there have touched on the issue of, I suppose, how much mechanical failure or the condition of a car or vehicle ranks in terms of causation, a causation factor. And if that's not being recorded properly, that's probably an issue that myself and some of my other colleagues on the policing board, I'm on this as well, could maybe bring up with them, just so that has to be captured.
Okay.
But thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Keith?
Okay, thanks. Coming along, I have a few questions. The TEOs, how many TEOs is out there that should be, the certificates that should be TEOs? TECs?
I think there's about four
Never for
there.
lorries. We're not dealing with lorries today.
TECs, sorry, TECs. How many TECs is out there that should be theoretically tested?
I don't know.
I actually don't have that number.
Yeah.
I know now. I
DVA
think
would hold the
I
information.
think
we don't have
it's
that.
so from memory. So there was I think it's about 1.2 million tests were required, and DVA we were delivering at about 1 million. So I would say it's in the region of 200,000.
What's that? Call it a fifth or slightly less.
So
The point I'm making is, so you talked earlier, Dorcas, about 80% was let's call that the normal pass rate. So all these vehicles, I can't want to say TO again, that's on the TECs, it's going to come into the system. If that drops to 75, what does that actually mean? Does that just mean, that could just mean, with respect, and I'm not saying mechanics are bad, but you could have bad mechanics, you could have cars not prepped properly for the, so it mightn't mean they're maintained properly.
well,
So, so what's that going to tell us?
So it depends on the size of the cohort that you'd be analysing, obviously. So if
That's
you,
my point, if it's 20%.
So if you, well, we're going to separate out, DVA are intending to separate out those cars specifically that have a TEC. So 100% of the sample will be people who've been TEC'd. So we compare those who have had a TEC against the compare whether it's all cars or not. So we'll be able to see specifically what's happened with those. And that, as I was saying to John earlier, depending on how long we wait until we, press the button and saying that we've got enough sufficient data to tell us what's going on, that cohort will get bigger. But again, whenever you're detecting a difference in a statistical sample, you need a big number if the difference is small. You need a small number to get a degree of assurance if the difference is big. So to the extent we just don't know at this point, but the numbers involved are big enough that we would be able to, I think, with some certainty, be able to say that there was a difference that made a difference, rather than just a difference that doesn't make a difference.
See if a vehicle, and I'm on the policing board as well, I think they're all here today, do you see if there's an incident where the vehicle is in an accident, is that recorded that vehicle has a TEC?
That I'm aware of, no.
No,
We've no that, but it would be recorded if the vehicle was faulty, obviously, that caused the accident.
Yeah.
Okay, but that could be dug into if need be.
Possibly.
The PSNI would
Yeah.
keep that information.
Next couple of points then. Where else in the UK and Ireland is doing this, the biennial?
Southern Ireland.
Just Southern Ireland.
Is doing it, the biennial in place for a number of years now. GB, the MOT at 3 years, and then every year after that.
You see, if I suppose you take a comparison to the south of Ireland. So today, if we go to do an MOT in Cookstown or wherever, it takes X time, and they're doing X tests. If you're doing biannual, is that going to change? So is it the test going to be longer, and is the test going to be more, not intrusive, but what's the word?
Stringent.
Yeah.
So again, I defer to my DVA colleagues who would be 100% certain about this, but the MOT test is European standard. So what we do is a European standard test. So those tests that we do have to meet.
But the test in NI and the test in RLA is different today.
Yeah, they're not like for like.
Yeah.
DVA have confirmed that. In the south, they do more sort of detailed emissions tests that we're not carrying out at this point in time.
You'd be aware there's an issue about emissions testing here, but all the other things are set within European
fair.
law. So it's
Emissions test is a big issue.
So, and there's certainly, I mean, again, you're the first person to mention it, but there certainly hasn't been a suggestion. Again, we're working through this, so this is very welcome feedback. About looking at potentially a more stringent MOT test. But I suppose the idea is that the MOT test assesses the roadworthiness of the vehicle at that point in time. So if it's coming in and it's been 2 years since its last one, is it roadworthy or is it not?
I think John made a good point about mileage. There's people doing 25, 30, 40,000 miles a year and other people doing 5.
Yeah.
Depends how well they maintain the vehicle.
It is, but theoretically more miles theoretically should mean more damage.
Yeah.
Well, it's more wear and tear for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that kind of maybe played out a little bit in the consultation, in that there was strong kind of in favour of biennial for just private vehicles and for motorcycles, but for light goods vehicles, they're going to white vans.
White vans, that's basically
Light goods vehicles, there was about 42% in favour of biennial and 41% not in favour, so very, very close comparison, because people obviously realise that maybe those type of vehicles would complete more mileage.
It's a very valid point. The emphasis is, as Cathal said, it's the responsibility of the vehicle owner to maintain the vehicle in a roadworthy condition. So, and whether that person is you would hope that somebody who's doing 100,000 miles would be replacing their tyres more and getting it serviced more. And the companies obviously encourage you to do that at certain trigger points. But absolutely, it's a legitimate point.
And last point, you're talking about road safety, and I mentioned as in the police board, I think the whole, and I said this last week, the road safety message in Northern Ireland is completely shot. It's completely road. Causation factors is that's not what it's saying. So I think we have to be very careful where we go down the method of road safety. If we say biennial's fine, and we're going down a dangerous road here. I think all I see now in media campaigns is it's the road, and that's not what's killing people.
It's 95% of them are human error.
Correct. So we need to be careful of that, and we could pay a price for that, unfortunately, in the future. So thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. There was just a couple of things that had come up in my mind whenever we were discussing some of this, and linked a wee bit to Keith's question in there. I don't want to go down the route of this today because it's not really part of this, but it is around the privatisation of MOT testing that there would be in England, isn't it? Scotland, Wales as well.
So yeah.
So, I mean, is there any evidence? I would have some initial concerns around privatisation of MOT testing, but is there any evidence, I suppose, from GB where that's been an issue too with roadworthiness of vehicles and how that testing is carried out?
So successive ministers have set their face against that and have been very clear. In part of those discussions, if you go on to the DVLA website, you will find on the homepage fraud prevention measures that they have on their homepage. So they recognise inherently in their model that fraud is part of what their system delivers. And so what they do is they say, here's what we do to stop the fraud that is part of our system. Our MOT system is simply a pass-fail with nobody I've ever heard has questioned the integrity of whether that result is an accurate reflection of what your vehicle is. The computer says yes or no, and that's pretty much it. So I am aware that the ministers are absolutely against it, but as you phrased the question in a road safety one, we do know that the GB system, by its own homepage, is saying fraud is part of this system. So people are getting MOT certificates fraudulently. We know that much. Now, they have got their KSI, their deaths per 100,000 miles and stuff like that. But looking at the two systems, that is an issue.
Yeah.
From a road safety perspective, they completed at the end of 2023, they did a consultation to look at whether or not they would move to MOT at 4 years, the same as ourselves. And their consultation, the synopsis of their consultation come back that they agreed that they would keep it at 3 years, and the reasons were mostly around road safety issues.
Okay. And then in terms of, obviously, as I said at the very start, all of us have a vested interest. Anybody who's replying to the consultation has a vested interest in this for a variety of reasons. But looking at business, because they did raise some concerns around what it would mean for garages. So will there be any departmental impact assessment which would be sort of independent from those garages and businesses side of things to assess what impact it may actually have? You know, anecdotally, the garages may be raising, you know, concern of loss of business, but will that actually be the case, particularly if people do understand that they need to keep their cars roadworthy?
Yeah. We had quite, you know, significant comments back from the automotive industry, and that included like local businesses. You know, through the consultation there was opportunity for them to put comments on how it might affect their business. Some said they were concerned about potential loss of revenue. Some thought that maybe potentially there was around unemployment, they might have to lay, not very many people having to let people go or whatever, but there was a few. Some of them thought that if people weren't servicing their cars as often, they may have to put their charges up. That we had quite very detailed information back from a lot of the umbrella groups that represent sort of the things we had. I just had the name of some of the organisations that come back to us. You know, there was we had, you know, significant, very detailed kind of responses back from the National Franchise Dealers Association, from the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, Independent Garage Association, National Tyre Distribution. So we had, and they all provided very comprehensive kind of detailed information.
So because of that detailed information, then from a departmental point of view, will the department be carrying out their own impact assessment of that data or information, or?
I need to take that away and have a think about it. I've obviously been sitting here thinking the whole time. So I need to give some thought to that.
Yeah.
If that's
okay. Fair enough.
The honest answer.
And then just relating back to Mark's question just around MOT centres and money spent on it, and I appreciate not fully within your remit, but I'm sure there is conversations that happen potentially around this. Obviously, the department is looking to invest in MOT centres. My local one is currently going through planning at the minute to get a new MOT test centre. So there's plans afoot to expand the offering that's there in MOT testing, and we're currently awaiting 2 test centres coming on board. Is there a slight juxtaposition where we bring in biannual testing and then some of those test centres could potentially be underutilised? So we're spending money to increase expansion of MOT centres, which I welcome. I'm not doubting that, but we have to look at it in the context of public purse and spend money, but potentially bring in biannual testing, which could see numbers reduce.
That's a very hard question, but yes, absolutely. So that would require a detailed analysis. That, you know, I mean, it's absolutely. I mean, the other factor in there is are we getting people to move away from using vehicle, you know, private cars as a vehicle, you know, so you know there's a lot of moving parts in that, and I don't have the answer to that. That's an economic business case, and I just can't answer.
It is something that we have thought about ourselves, and it is something that we'll be engaging with DBA and with the minister on.
Business model. So yes, it's a very valid point. It takes detailed analysis where.
Okay. Cathal, were you looking in on a point, were you?
I was, Chair, thank you. Just 3 quick points. Is there any evidence to suggest that, say in the south, is biennial, that it's a more comprehensive service when they go into the garages because they know it's a biannual test. Because an ordinary service, like I said to you, that's why I asked the question about service fee MOT. That's one question. The other one is, and I just wrote, that's something for conversation, all right? You wouldn't have that, but it's just something I'll bring up.
I mean, we have looked at the NCT kind of all their data and stuff like that. So they sit around 52% for first time test passing, and they have information on what they.
100%, and that's fair enough. You could argue, people. The question is this: you can drive your car for 11 months, then not look at it, and then put it in to mechanic to MOT it, right? Or you could do a check at 6 months. So the same principle then would apply if it's 2 years. You could drive it for that 18, 20 months, and then say, right, I'll get my test done now. I'll get my service done for all that. So it's sitting at 52%.
Yeah.
So
and the common kind of things that they fail on
lower.
are like tyres, brakes, suspension, lights.
And that's just right. And that's right. I'm only asked. That's one question. The other one obviously is about drivers and the behaviour towards. So going by that percentage, you just have to say that means that they're leaving it because it's about changing attitudes. You know, I appreciate you say, Chair. I'm sorry to labour the point, but I appreciate you say you get the car serviced. But if I went and get the car serviced in the morning, I fairly know what my car would be getting service for, but it wouldn't be ball joints or track rod ends or anything else which you need for MOT roadworthiness. That generally doesn't happen. Listen, I don't want to get into it, but I understand that.
No, your view is very much the kind of was supported by the insurance bodies in that they said there's always a number of unroadworthy vehicles on the car or on the road. So, you know, you're saying there you drive it for 20 months and then, you know, a couple of weeks before and it's unroadworthy, and then a couple of weeks before your MOT's due, you're going to get it serviced and suddenly it's roadworthy, but for 20 months it hasn't been. But they said that then the annual check will potentially reduce the number at a quicker point than at 24 months.
Well, I'll finish this, Chair. It's all about the driver and the vehicle and having responsibility.
Yes.
And the vehicle should be roadworthy at all times. You get an MOT certificate or a TE certificate, it lasts for 12 months. Mm-hmm. When you go to MOT the day after you get your car MOT'd, it may or may not be. It was MOT'd the day before, so there's always those arguments. But I just want to throw that in. But thanks, Annie, Chair. Yeah.
Thank you. I think Stephen's looking in on a quick point.
Just briefly on the Republic of Ireland, then it's every 2 years for vehicles under 10 years old, and then annually for vehicles after 10 years. Has there been any consideration of that sort of approach, do you think? Going forward, we're like a halfway house, you know.
That is the proposal in the consultation. Was a range of different options for when you would do biennial. So would you skip the test at 5 and 7? Would you skip the test at 5, 7 and 9? You know, so those were the range of options. So it was pretty much exactly that. And there does seem to be a broad recognition across. So in the figures Dorcas had, it's 2 plus 2 plus 2, then 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Other European countries at a point start to test annually. So part of the consultation was looking at the range of options as to what did people feel comfortable missing 3 MOTs in that, 2. So yeah, absolutely. That's younger cars are obviously expected to be more reliable.
Yeah. Just final point in terms of EV vehicles, obviously we've seen quite a rise in them. Is there any data available yet in terms of their sort of MOT success rates or anything?
Be aware of.
Not that you're aware of. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, Keith, you were looking at a quick point.
I missed that, Doris. Did you say 52% were failing in Norway?
In the south.
In the south.
52%.
Passing.
That's the
Passing.
Passing.
So it's roughly half.
yeah at first test.
So what was that like before the biennials in the south?
I don't know because I don't
That's
know.
a big shocking statistic.
Holy cow.
Shocking
So
statistic
we're
with half a
82.
failing.
The south is 52 for first rate passes. There's a 30 percentage point difference between the
And
pass
do you-
rate here
and do we
pass
know
rate
what
in the south.
them failures were?
Well, they have on their website that it is around things like, you know, broken lights, tyres, suspension,
Brakes.
Yeah, those are they weren't all the reasons, but they're common.
That 52 figures, the going away figure from this presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What age vehicles? South compared to?
Sorry, what was that?
What age does it have the first MOT at? Is it 4?
4. Yeah, it's the same. Look, thank you very much for your time. Hopefully you've got some views to take away with you today, and certainly I think that the overarching theme coming out of today's discussion, I think, is that road safety element, which as a committee we're concerned about just as well. We don't want to add to that, but it's how we strike that balance and get things right. So, but look, thank you very much. And as we're now entering recess, I just want to wish you a lovely summer, and no doubt we'll see you once we come back again. Thank you for your time. Much appreciated. Okay, members, was there anything that anybody just wanted to raise coming out of that at this moment in time? Are you content? Content, yeah?
And for now, yeah.
Okay, so are you content then? We move on then to item 8, which is the SL1, the Planning Miscellaneous Amendments Regulation Northern Ireland 2025. We're just getting a quick briefing in relation to this because we did just raise a few questions. So at page 336 you'll see the Clerk's memo. At page 338 you'll see the SL1 Planning Miscellaneous Amendments Regulation Northern Ireland 2025. The rule is subject to negative resolution. So just as an overview, these provisions have been developed as part of the review of the Plan and Development Management Regulations Northern Ireland 2015. The Development Management Regulations brought forward by the Department, local government and other stakeholders to deliver change through the Plan and Improvement Programme. These measures and recommendations emerged through the call for evidence as part of the review of the implementation of the 2011 Act required under Section 228 of that Act. The committee initially considered the proposal at its meeting on Wednesday the 18th of June and agreed to invite departmental officials to attend a meeting to provide clarification on the purpose of the statutory rule. So we welcome to the committee today. Thank you for coming up so soon. Rosemary Daly, Director of Regional Planning, Governance and Legislation, Department for Infrastructure, and Nola Jemison, Head of Vehicle Policy, Branch Department for Infrastructure. So hopefully we'll not keep you too long. I think there was just some initial questions just that we wanted to check through. Obviously planning is very important and we just want to make sure that there's no real unintended consequences just as a result. So if you don't mind, if you want to provide us with a brief opening statement of about 5 minutes.
That Nola's actually our legislation lead in planning. And just to say, we also have Scott Alexander and Sarah Douglas, who are placement students. They've been with us for a year and we just thought it would be lovely to bring them up and let them see how the Infrastructure Committee works.
Yes, absolutely. You're very welcome to the Infrastructure
They've made a massive contribution this year, so they're nearly finished.
Hopefully someday you'll be sitting in these seats and we'll have you as departmental officials in the Infrastructure Committee, so you're very welcome. Thank you.
Brilliant. Look, I suppose the best thing to do is obviously give you a little bit of context, and I want to just thank you for the opportunity to come up and meet with you and speak to you about the SL1 for the Planning Miscellaneous Amendments Regulations Northern Ireland. And before turning to the specific proposal in ST, I'd like to just give you a bit of context about what does this actually mean for the planning system. Unfortunately, it is a small area of it, but all these small changes do accumulate to hopefully efficiencies and improvements. So these amendments are part of a wider review of the development management regulations for Northern Ireland. The review stems originally from the review of the implementation of the Planning Act and was brought forward in 2 phases and is a key strand of the development, the Department's Planning Improvement Programme. So it's one of the actions was the development management regulations. The aim, obviously, is to deliver a more efficient, effective and inclusive planning system, one that is trusted to deliver high-quality, sustainable and healthy places. And following the public consultation which took place in 2024, it was decided to adopt a 2-phase approach to this review. The Department... sorry, just 1 second. This review... following the consultation, it takes in 2 phases. So obviously the phase 1 is to look at these 2 elements, which is the predetermination hearings and the enhancing the pre-application community consultation. Then phase 2 is the second part of the development management regulations, which the piece of legislation doesn't relate to at this stage, and that will focus at reviewing the classes and thresholds of development which underpin applications and how they're categorised in the planning process. So the public consultation, which ran from December 23 to March 24, focused on all of the 3 areas. So just to remind you, so there was the pre-application community consultation, the predetermination hearings, and the classes and thresholds of development, which I've just mentioned. So today, this piece of legislation that we're bringing forward really focuses on the first 2 areas, which is the pre-application community consultation and the predetermination hearings. So to give you some context, what is a predetermination hearing? Some of you may have had experience of this, but just to put it in simple context, a predetermination hearing is a public meeting held by a council before it makes a decision on certain plan applications, and it gives members of the applicants and members of the public a chance to directly speak to the planning committee. Currently, these hearings are mandatory, so you don't have any choice. By legislation means that they have to happen. However, feedback from councils and stakeholders during the review of the implementation of the Planning Act highlighted that this requirement caused an unnecessary delay in the administration burden, especially when the issues have already been fully aired and considered through different and various parts of the planning process. So it's almost like another round of consideration. Now, there may be opportunities where that predetermination hearing has a place and is important, and it obviously the main thing here is to give the council discretion as to whether they should implement a predetermination hearing or not, rather than making it mandatory. So it depends really on what the case is or the issues, and obviously to give the council more discretion allows them to have more control. So we feel that in revoking this part of the legislation, it means that there's a change about trusting councils to use their own judgment, reducing unnecessary delays and making the system more responsive, while still ensuring the public engagement is used where it adds value. So the pre-application community consultation, that is basically the process where developers must consult with the local community before submitting a planning application for major development. The aim is to give people an early opportunity to see what has been proposed. During the pandemic, obviously we moved very quickly into this sort of remote and online consultation process, and that actually, the benefits out of that really enhanced the process, where things were available digitally. It meant that we could open up, consultations to a much wider audience. It also meant that if something was available, if it didn't suit you to get to that consultation at that point in time, you could go online and you could view the application. So the department's approach here is a dual approach. We still believe that there is merit in having that online, in-person public event where people can come along and meet the stakeholders or the developer of the proposal, ask questions in person, because sometimes that works really well. It also means for those people that are not digitally connected that there still is that opportunity to come along and meet, have that face-to-face engagement. The second piece is where we now will, through this legislation, facilitate the online consultation. So that will mean that developers will now be required to provide a website which details all the draft proposals and allows the collection of feedback. That actually is quite similar to other jurisdictions, and this piece of legislation just makes it a requirement that you have to provide that now. Again, it facilitates widening the pool of people that can participate and view the application, so it's actually really beneficial. It also facilitates, perhaps even if we use the portal, the planning portal is a really good example, where there's possibly less queries coming through to a planning office if it's all available for you on a website, that you can see what the application is, look at the different environmental impact statement and anything else, all the documents that are associated with the application. So the approach really is that no one will be left behind, so this will give the options for face-to-face and online consultation. As I've said, that'll bring us into similar areas, other jurisdictions. So whilst today's proposals are important, I also want to emphasise the phase 2, and the phase 2 is obviously the bigger piece of the review of development management regulations. And out of that we have collated the information and we have feedback, and we have arranged 2 workshops to actually just, with the people that were involved in the consultation, just to make sure our recommendations are robust and correct, because we don't want to be doing this in a few years' time again. We want to do this and do it well. We'd also like to extend and invite the committee, if anybody would like to come to those workshops, to hear the conversations about, where major, local, what is regionally significant, because that's changing the thresholds for certain types of developments. So it would mean as well that you'll maybe get a really good in-depth understanding. So if you wish, we can extend that invite. We'll get a formal invite issued. It's a wee bit more technical, this information, and that's why just to take that more of a workshop approach to it and ensure it's right. And our plans are that we would hopefully be bringing that legislation through before the end of the financial year. Whenever that exercise is complete, there will be 2 workshops, one with the local councils and any other the key stakeholders, and then the other people that made representations. So that is really where we're working to. So I'm very happy to take any questions.
Super, thank you.
So I hope it makes sense.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's obviously just the committee just wanted to check on some of the aspects of it, and hopefully we'll not keep you too long. So I do appreciate your time and coming up. If you wouldn't mind setting the details to the committee just in relation to those roundtable stakeholder events, and then, you know, members then can take a view whether they're able to go along. I just wanted to check in terms of online, and that's where things are heading, but does removing that mandatory requirement risk discouraging that problem solving around applications? Or, you know, do you think that will actually help with it? I know that you were indicating, you know, that if it's online, there'd be less to planning offices and less queries to planning offices. Everything would be more, I suppose, open for people, would widen the pool. But in terms of whenever it's pre-determination, it's usually those more contentious type applications, if I can say that cause some of the problems. So
I think it's just to be clear, it's 2 separate parts of the process. So your predetermination hearings still would happen at discretion. So this is going back to the very start of the process, where you'll be looking at your pre-application consultation. So basically, a developer's coming along, they'll have their proposal. It will be on a website link. So before it goes into the system, that's already set up. That means that anybody involved in that consultation would see it. That website link will probably become part of the embedded documentation for any application. When it comes to the predetermination hearing, that is a situation where the department may issue a notification to call something in. So after that notification goes back to the council, it's mandatory that they would have another hearing. So they've already got to the stage where they've concluded we're going to approve this or refuse it. And it is a case of, well, it means that once that notification or that notification goes back to the councils, that they have to, at this point in time, have another hearing, even when everything's already been debated and the matter has, you know, been well considered. So it's just another step. It doesn't mean that the council may still take the action. Well, we will still do this because we feel there's a benefit, but because it's mandatory, there may be some cases, and some of this could be as simple as, you know, it could be a small, relatively simple scheme that maybe doesn't require the full council to come back and consider it. So it's just to allow that flexibility, which improves efficiencies and timescales. So it's, as I've said at the outset, it's a small step, but it's one that will hopefully try and speed things up.
And then a review, you know, will obviously this will be, you know, something that's you know, new in a sense for people. So will there be a departmental review of how councils are coping with that, you know, how they make decision making around some of the applications that are in there, and, you know, that type of thing?
I suppose in terms of like numbers of what we're talking here, between 2018 and 2023 there were only 23 mandatory PD hitches that were actually required, so they're quite limited. But during the call for evidence in RIPA, the councils and other stakeholders came to us and said these are causing an unnecessary delay and administrative burden for us because the application's already been through the process, and then if the application was notifiable, the mandatory ones are notifiable to the department. We'll have had it for a period of time, went back to the council and said we're not calling it in, and the decision wasn't changing, but they couldn't just issue the decision. It was at that point they then had to arrange a predetermination hearing. So they were saying it was causing them delay. This is something that they would welcome, they're supportive of this, and they've asked for it in the call for evidence for RIPA, and we said in our RIPA report that we'd bring forward this proposal to make it discretionary for them.
Okay.
So, you know, the councils do have our support in this.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to move to other members who have some questions or comments. So,
Yeah, Chair, very briefly, and thanks for coming along and just for clarifying the information for the committee today. And yes, I would take you up on that offer as well when we go along to that session. It would be really useful. And I welcome anything I think speeds up the process. I think we've identified that. Councils are on board, as is the department. Just keen to get, you mentioned, Rosemary, about the other jurisdictions that currently have this. How long has that been in place? What are their experiences? I'm assuming we're copying it because it's worked well for them, effectively. Is that right?
I can take it from my own experience.
Yes.
Of submitting an application, so I suppose the one actually is even looking to the south, where, you know, the onus is on the developer in the preparation. A lot of information now is available digitally.
Yes.
So is there another burden really on the developer? Really, not so much in that it's basically correlating all the information in one web link or whatever, or website. So that's standard practice. It reduces the burden. It also can probably, there's other areas of efficiencies we can make. If that was in place, you know, we may be able to look, without getting ahead of ourselves, obviously it all will be subject to consultation and obviously agreement for everyone, but it allows us to look into, you know, the whole thing about public consultation as well. If there's a website link there, it also would allow efficiencies with statutory consultees, because they can go to that link as well and find the information. So there's a lot of efficiencies by the fact that if a web site is available for anybody in the system, for anybody using the system, even internally or externally, you know, if it's there and all the information is the same for everyone, it's a really, really good way of streamlining things. So that is what is the experience. I mean, I recall submitting an application in the south, and what you had to do is you put the website together. Out of that, the statutory consultees are sent a letter with a link to the website. So that's how efficient it is, rather than, you know, we want to get away from this printing information all the time.
Yes.
And, you know, so there's a lot of efficiencies can be. So if you can get that set up at the outset, that will have knock-on benefits coming through. And the fact that we would have legislation to support that, that would be helpful in doing that, because at the minute there's no requirement to do it.
I suppose what we've also found, I don't have exact numbers for the committee, but if we're looking on the planning portal at pre-application notices, a lot of the applicants have continued hosting websites in their public engagement since COVID. Okay. So it's a trend that has continued, and they obviously find it beneficial because they're doing it on a non-statutory basis.
Well, that's really useful information. Appreciate that.
Super, thank you. Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. Just wondering what consideration has been given to issuing guidance to councils on deciding whether predetermination should be. I mean, I appreciate it's discretionary, but is there, I mean, do you say, you know, you should be doing it in this matter sort of thing?
So essentially, we do have the Development Management Practice Note 17, which was for all types of predetermination hearings, but it's important to point out that Section 30 gives councils discretion to decide how and when and what types of applications would be heard under the discretionary route. So in terms of the guidance, it's quite high level because the legislation under the Act does give that power to the councils. But there is guidance at a high level of what you might want to look at, and that will still remain.
I suppose just, you know, planning can be contentious. So I mean, what's like, how has there been any public feedback, you know, on this regard and removing, you know, again, just in removing something like this? I mean, I'm just wondering what the tangible, practical outcomes might be of that.
Just in terms of the public consultation, 44% agreed with the proposal to make them discretionary. 22 respondents disagreed, and 34 did not respond. So the 44 did agree. In terms of feeling that you might be removing transparency in the decision-making process from the public, we're satisfied that the public participation is safeguarded, because there's obviously PAC, just through other statutory consultations, there's PAC, neighbour notification, advertising, there's speaking rights at committee already. So we feel there is still opportunity, and we're not removing transparency out of the system for the public. And of course the council, should they be requested through various objections or complexity, can always hold that discretionary PDH if they feel it would add value to the decision-making process.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Cahill.
Thanks, Chair. Didn't know my favourite subjects was coming up today, Chair.
You should have read your papers.
No, but I knew this was
Slice of humble pie. Yeah?
No. I knew this was coming up, but it's a favourite subject. It's a favourite subject, the recent one, but this is a favourite subject. I mean, the 2011 Act. It's a pity we didn't see that at the time in the discretionary. Because I mean, a lot of the decisions has been held up. See, the pre-application was a front loading, and to resolve all the matters. And it's funny now you say, well, especially online's only come over this last 5 or 6 years. You know what I mean? Even the new system we tried to introduce. So I mean, it's most welcome. The issue of the discretionary power. I mean, clearly you have evidence from councils. You know what I mean?
Evidence,
you know what I mean, to be fair to them and trying to move it on, because that's the two things we get. I get mostly now. I don't be involved as much now because the council has more powers, more responsibility in it. But I certainly welcome that, because that's the one we get. It's interesting the online. Anybody can go online now and make, give an opinion, and we're learning from that. There's evidence, but listen, it's certainly most welcome. I mean, for those who weren't there for the Act, I mean, it was a big piece of legislation for us. There's no doubt about it.
And I suppose in a way the practice has sort of shown that it doesn't need to be mandatory, other than it just adds another layer of in the decision-making process, which elongates the decision-making process. And, if these are contentious applications that may have been subject of a notification to call, where we would consider calling, there obviously is some element of contention around them. But at the same point, the council will have thoroughly considered them before that exercise. So when it goes back to the council that we're not calling it in, this means that they can move to either have the hearing or not. So it just, again, is given a little bit more power over to the councils, which I think is what we want to be doing, supporting that they've more discretion about how they do things. So a small piece of legislation is one that will join up, and and we just felt that the 2 phases was really good, that if we could move to get this part, that means that we can very much focus in on the detail of the other part, and that these aren't necessarily missed in the detail of the other part. So that's why we decided to take through, with the agreement of the Minister, to take through this in 2 steps. So I think it makes sense that hopefully with your agreement that we can move to make the legislation, obviously. That means we can very much come back and get very focused in the thresholds, which will be very critical in the improvements. So.
Cahill, happy enough?
Yeah, Chair, obviously nobody was on council and done planning before, because they wouldn't be called back in to explain it in the first place, but anyways,
Keith?
Yeah, thanks, Rosemary Nola. Just a quick question. What do you define a major category? Give me an example of that.
So that's within the development management regulations. There's a schedule appended to the back, and it might be your larger housing schemes. It could be some energy infrastructure projects. So any major applications are the ones that are required to do pre-application community consultation.
So if I'm going to build, say, whatever that is, say 200 houses, for example, what's my process today? So I'm going to start doing that tomorrow. What's the process?
So today you have to you do your pre-application notice to the council or the department. You have to have pre-application community consultation, which includes a mandatory in-person event.
Yeah, okay.
You advertise that in the paper, tell people where it's going to be, what time it's going to be at. You can, the minimum is 1. You can do as many as you feel is necessary, depending on the scale of your project.
Okay.
And just as I was saying, from what we're finding since COVID, and particularly people moving to digital, a lot of applicants are already using websites now, and you can see evidence of that on the portal as well.
So effectively the website's a bolt on to that process, yeah? So I set up my website. Who's, and I can direct people to that, okay? And in here it says about people can make comments. So let's say...
So do you want me to just say how it will actually work in practice, set out the new bit?
Yeah.
So essentially, you do your in-person event as well.
It's a must anyway.
It's a must.
Okay.
Then in addition to that, you have to have a dedicated website which will display your draft development proposals, like your plans, any environmental reports you've already prepared, any design statements. That website has to be available for a minimum of 28 days in the 12-week period of your pre-application community consultation. And you have to have a facility for the public to give feedback. Now that could be as much as here is the email to contact us with any feedback you have. Now the legislation already requires that the applicants publish a notice, and that the legislation is now requiring that the notice will also give details of the website and the period of time it's available within that consultation period. And again, we're updating the Development Management Practice Note 10 just to set those steps out.
So if people go onto, let's call it my website, and say I'm not happy with this for whatever reason, how do you take it? So say I have 40 objections, for argument's sake, on my website. How is that related to an objection on the planning portal?
So just to say this is pre-application.
Yeah, okay,
so,
fair enough.
And there's also in the legislation, the advertisement again specifies that the applicant must say in his notice, or their notice, sorry, that if representation is made at pre-application engagement stage, it is not an objection to the planning application. And if you want to further that issue, you have to submit again at the time of the planning application.
At the very start, Rosemary, you said to improve efficiency broadly. How, and I'm not being negative to this, but how is this doing that? Explain to me how this is doing it, because this looks like another thing to do.
Well, basically what it is, obviously opens opportunity for more people to be engaged before the application goes into the system.
And that could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on the way you look at that.
Well, it could be, but the thing that the planning system tries to be is open and transparent. So it opens up the transparency, no matter, obviously it means that people can, or more freely to put their comments in. But as Nola said, this is the pre-application consultation, so you still would need to make your official objection through the planning system when it comes in. So that, but what we're saying is, and actually just reporting, I'm going to take the opportunity to talk about how our majors are actually improving. So our major applications are subject to these pre-application consultations, which some of them are actually, a lot of work is done before the application is submitted. So if you have a concern, a major application, a massive wind farm or a significant housing development you've referred to, so you can actually, have a discussion, you can actually express, and some ways even some people communicate better by email, some people communicate better by the in-person. So maybe if you're not a person that feels you could actually go up to someone and say, there still has to be a level of professionalism about it, because it is open and transparent. And it's a way of engaging, and public participation in any planning system is very, very vital and important part of it. So, I think it gives an opportunity before the application goes into the system to address any concerns, even, so that takes a little bit more of a burden of the system. So it also safeguards the developer. Well, our website was also available, so, I didn't get to your consultation event, so therefore, it was on our website, that opportunity is there for you to see that information as well. So it will create an efficiency in the process. Yes, it does expose the proposal, but that's a good thing, because if it's done at the right time, that limits, well, not limit, but it certainly can allow the developer or anybody who's come along with a proposal to get in and address concerns. So they're less of an issue when they come into the planning system. And actually, that's what happens with our major applications. And statistics last week are showing that our major applications are performing really well. And this could be one of the measures that, is a benefit in the process. That a lot of front loading of the issues are dealt with at the pre-application stage. So.
Okay, thanks.
Okay,
thanks.
Cathal, you were looking.
No, Chair, and it's important, obviously, for the committee to understand. I mean, the reason why we brought that forward was front loading, so most of the information would be up front, instead of somebody introducing something else at a later stage to hold the application process up. And that's why the change is vitally important, so that as many people as involved as possible. But just back to the major applications, when you're paying money for a major application, you're not going to get it, well, you're not going to try and get it wrong. There's substantial money involved in putting in major applications. But this point, Chair, is we call it front loading, and it's I think it's a good measure, to be honest.
I mean, it gets everything up front. It gets issues up, you can begin to start to address them and make the amendments before the application even goes into the system. So I think it is, this pre-application consultation is probably one of the factors that's resulting in the benefits to our major applications. Obviously, when we go back to look at the thresholds, maybe more applications will be tipped into the major. That's obviously has to be discussed and decided. So that's why it'd actually be brilliant to have the committee at that workshop if that's possible, to hear what's been said. So.
No, and I suppose that's why as a committee, you know, we just wanted to check and have complete clarity before, you know, we made a decision, you know, going forward in terms of what this will mean, because obviously all of us deal with the consequences of what comes out of legislation that comes from here, and planning's obviously one of those ones where we just want to make doubly sure that when we're putting this in place, and you've said that yourself, that we've got that right. So Mark, sorry, I just see your hand there now. I'm not muting you.
Use the remote control there, Joe.
Got you now.
There we go. Thank you, Chairman. And my hand just went up there. See, in things right now, the predetermination hearings won't be mandatory. Can councils, an applicant can request one, can they? And can councils refuse one, or will they be able to refuse one?
Yes. So the power under Section 30 brackets 4 of the Act still remains, and that's always been there, and that's for councils to hold discretionary predetermination hearings where they feel it would add value. And I know even from speaking with a planner in one of the other councils last week, they were actually holding a discretionary hearing that week, so they do take place. It's case by case basis and the complexities, and maybe, as you say, if it was requested by third party or other objections that are coming in, but the power will always remain. We're not taking that away
by applicants, and I'm less familiar with when it might have been used by objectors in an instance, because they perceive a sort of inequality of arms an applicant might, and that when they just go to planning committee, they get their 5 minutes presentation and then question and answer session. So they sometimes feel that the predetermination hearing gives them more scope or more time to get to make their case, and you know, sometimes that's used, sometimes it might be abused as well. On issues around sorry, I did read my papers, Chair, but I can't read them now. I can't open my tablet for some reason. We're doing well on majors. Is that based on like the processing times, and the clock on processing time? Does it just start after the pre-application process is closed?
So the PAC work that we're doing here is all before the planning application is submitted to the department. So from the point of receipt of the PAN, your pre-application notice, there's a minimum period of 12 weeks before you can actually submit the planning application. So the clock only starts once an application is received and is made valid.
And is there anywhere where we track or record, I suppose, those pre-application periods and how long that's taking? Obviously it will be on a case-by-case basis, but for some applications you can have a pre-application process that could drag on almost
I suppose the onus, and even our guidance would say the onus is on the applicant to conduct their pre-application community consultation. There's no monitoring mechanism because it is not in the portal by that point. You know, and some people go beyond the 12-week minimum period because they feel it's more beneficial for their project. Also, you don't know what might come out of your engagement, if there's issues that they want to address before putting the application in terms of front loading, trying to get it right, and hopefully moving it through the system as quick as possible. So we don't have a monitoring mechanism. It is onus on the developer.
But there is a minimum that you're required to do, like one consultation, and you know, on your 12 weeks. So if a developer decides to go, or anyone that's come with a proposal decides to go beyond that, that's entirely a matter for them. But you know, this is a sort of statutory part of the major application process. So you know, it's something that you should, you know, be bought into, because it pays dividends, and that's why you can see, you know, the timescales for the first time with majors has really improved, and you know, and even in our discussions around with the councils in the past year, we've picked that up, that it's really the majors teams that are putting a lot of effort in, and councils are also working with the applicants at the pre-application as well. You know, there's discussions been had outside of the application before they come in. So, you know, that means that the clocks, obviously, Mark, as you said, doesn't start until the application's lodged. So that's the performance measure that you're assessing.
And is there a resource issue then, though, whenever councils and officers and other statutory consultees are working with potential applicants, because they're not applicants yet, prior to an application being lodged, but a planning fee won't have been received? Is there any issue?
This would fall under the pre-application discussions, so some of that will come into that, Mark. So some councils do and have the discretion to charge for that process. Again, it's what you put in. You know, it's about improving the quality of what's going into the system. So it's also to the council's benefit to engage as well at this stage if they're asked to do so. Obviously, if an application come in and all of the statutory requirements for pre-application consultation hasn't happened, that obviously is a concern for anybody submitting that application. So it's important that anybody making an application fulfills those requirements. So resource-wise, yes, there probably is a requirement on the councils, but that is part of any pre-application discussion as well.
And whenever resources are so tight across statutory consultees and in planning teams across the north, is there a prioritisation, you know, of live applications over pre-application, or how does that be worked?
I mean, I suppose though to say the proposal of introducing the online engagement is not adding an extra resource over and beyond what the councils are already doing in terms of their engagement with councils during pre-application discussions. The PAC element is the developers work with the public. There'll also obviously be any pre-application discussions with councils and consultees, which is already hopefully happening as best it can within the resources that the councils have at the minute. But this new proposal wouldn't put additional resource pressures onto council officials.
No, and I think the website thinks a good move, but obviously, well, I can't get on the tablet today. Technology isn't for everyone. Are there any foreseen and I know they're going to have to do publish an ad in a local paper, but we know how sadly circulation of local papers has dropped so dramatically. Are there any plans or ideas around an enhanced neighbour notification process?
Yeah, that's one thing that we are market is on the list of things to do, and I suppose to get this public consultation affirmed through legislation that a web base is, you know, the digital, for want of a better word, is a good thing. So if we get this process then, and that works well, then you can take this to the next level. Obviously, how we advertise and Neighbour Notify is an area which is quite resource intensive, and it is an area that we do plan to look at going forward. But it's obviously, as I've said, unfortunately, it's a lot of small steps which will hopefully add up. Again, this improves, and as Noel has just said, that really the fact that what this legislation means, it should actually also help the resource of the planning officer, because people can go to the website as opposed to the council. And even with that, what we've heard back in our discussions with councils, even the portal has reduced the number of queries to councils because it's all available online, so people can go and see, you know, applications online as opposed to having to ring up the planning officer and find out or have a meeting. So, you know, it's just making it, as back to my point, it's making everything more open and transparent and more accessible for everybody. So
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, yes.
Thank you. I think that's all for now anyway. It's just down to us now to agree or disagree, but Luke, thank you very much for your time today. We really appreciate you coming up to committee just to provide us with that clarity as well, which will help us make our decisions. So thank you very much.
Oh, we really welcome the opportunity as well, because sometimes it's the questions when you're thinking about that really helps understanding for everybody.
Exactly.
So, thank you.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, members, are you content?
Thank you.
Great, Chair, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so members, are you content with the proposal for the statutory rule then based on the evidence that we received today?
Yes.
Yeah, everybody agreed? Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 9, which is the SI 2025 678, the Vehicle Emissions Trading Schemes Amendment Order 2025. So from pages 342 to 354, there's papers relating to the statutory instrument. The SI was led on the 18th of June 2025 in the Business Office. The purpose of this instrument is to amend the Vehicle Emissions Trading Schemes Order 2023, the 2023 Order, and the Vehicle Emissions Trading Schemes Amendment Order 2024, the 2024 Order, to specify how provisions of Regulation EU 2019 631, which were saved by the 2023 Order and 2024 Order, are administered. This instrument enables the Secretary of State to calculate the specific CO2 emission targets for vehicle manufacturers under Regulation EU 2019 631 using inputs from UK or EU derived values. So are members content to note the statutory instrument, or is there any other further information or clarification required? Content?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now move to item 10, which is the SR 2025-107, the Belize Gardens and Belize Way Lisburn Abandonment Order Northern Ireland 2025. So from pages 349 to 354, you'll see documents in relation to statutory rule. Tabled at page 37 is the ESR report. The rule is subject to negative resolution. So the purpose of the rule is to abandon 2 areas of land totaling 340.76 square metres, comprising of a turning head measuring 165.92 square metres adjacent to number 9 Belize Gardens, Lisburn, and a turning head measuring 174.84 metres adjacent to number 3 Belize Way, Lisburn, after completion of such works as the Department considers necessary to provide alternative facilities. The rule is due to come into operation on the 22nd of September 2025. So members of the committee considered the proposal for the statutory rule at its meeting on the 4th of June 2025 and was content. The examiner of statutory rules has reported on the rule and has no comment to make. So are members content with the statutory rule? Content, yeah. So the motion is that the Committee for Infrastructure has considered SR 2025-107, the Belize Gardens and Belize Way Lisburn Abandonment Order Northern Ireland 2025, and has no objection to the rule. Okay, item 11 is the SL1, the Motorways Traffic Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2025. You'll see pages 365 to 381 papers in relation to the proposal for the statutory rule. The rule will be subject to negative resolution procedure. The rule will change the operational hours of the bus lanes which use the hard shoulder on the motorways, so that the bus lanes may be used at any time as directed by signage. It will also amend the description of some of these bus lanes to better reflect the existing road markings. The proposal aims to provide flexibility when managing the motorway asset and maintain bus progression times to Belfast at all times, including during special events. So are members content with the proposal for the statutory rules? Yeah.
Content, yeah.
Okay, item 12 is subordinate legislation. SR is not subject to assembly procedure. So there are 3 statutory rules that are not subject to assembly proceedings and are not required to be laid. These are pages 383 to 421 of the meeting pack, and they are the SR 2025, 114, the Road Races Garn Point Hill Climb Order Northern Ireland 2025, SR 2025, 115, the Parking and Waiting Restrictions Lisburn Amendment Order Northern Ireland 2025, and the SR 2025 116 Loading Bays on Roads Order Northern Ireland 2025. So just remind members that the committee noted the proposals for the statutory rules at its meeting on the 4th and 8th of June 2025. So are members content to note the statutory rules?
Yes.
Content? Okay, thank you. Item 13 is subordinate legislation, SL1 not subject to assembly procedure. So there are 5 proposals. SL1's for statutory rules that are not subject to assembly proceedings and are not required to be laid. These are listed from pages 423 to 438 and are tabled at page 46, and they are the SL1, the road speed limit number 3 order Northern Ireland 2025, SL1, the control of traffic Glengall Street, Belfast order Northern Ireland 2025, the SL1, the parking places on roads, coaches, Glengall Street, Belfast order Northern Ireland 2025, SL1, the waiting restrictions, Boyne Bridge Place, Belfast, pick up and drop off point order Northern Ireland 2025, and the SL1, the control of traffic, Belfast City Centre order Northern Ireland 2025. Do any members have any issues that they want to raise on any of the proposals? I just have one, which is related to the SL1, the road speed limit number 3 order, just in relation to Gardeners Cross Road. Knowing the area and as a local representative, I'm just a bit concerned about the deregulation of 30-mile-per-hour speed limit, and just to ascertain why that is, particularly in that area, and what that will mean going forward, because there is housing there in that area. So I just wanted to double check why the rationale behind why that is the case, because road safety, of course, is very, very important. So I just want to clarify that, if that's okay, if members are content.
What was the council's view on it?
I don't think they responded.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's fair enough.
So and so just to check that.
Sorry, yeah.
Is it currently a 30?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, yeah. So it's deregulation of it. So I'm just a wee bit.
How did it meet it? It says it does not meet it, but why was it meet it then?
Well, that's what I'm trying to establish what's going on there in relation to that, just because there is housing and things around there. So it's just not something that I was aware of that would be the case. So we'll just double check it out.
Members content that that's in writing rather than having officials come up?
Yeah, no, writing I think is fair enough.
And they may have to come up. I mean, just let's get them writing first and see.
Yeah.
Do you have the explanation?
Yeah. Okay, are members content then with the rest of the proposals for the statutory rules? Content, yeah. Okay, item 14 is Eastern Transport Plan, Department for Infrastructure written evidence. So tabled, you'll see in the main pack there was obviously papers contained within it to do with this, and then there's a corrected version in our table paper, so that's why we have to, just to make that clear to members. So tabled at page 54 is the Eastern Transport Plan written evidence. At page 440 there's the Eastern Transport Plan Department for Infrastructure written evidence. At page 442 you'll see the Eastern Transport Plan engagement report, and at page 482 there's the Eastern Transport Plan key points, and obviously there is confidential marking on the written evidence. Does anybody have any comments on the written evidence that they want to raise at this particular moment in time? I think officials are going to hopefully come up to the committee at some point.
In the autumn.
Yeah.
If members are content that officials will be asked to come up in the autumn when this is finalised. They've also invited us to a site visit, so it's for members to consider that as well if they wish to.
Okay.
Done that site visit as well. So whenever Stormont was down, we had informal meetings with the PermSec, and one of his officials took me and my researcher to show us the transport plan, so really encourage that. Okay, well we'll see whenever it comes in at that moment in time and make a call on it as well. Obviously in relation to committee time, with legislation that will be hitting us once we come back. So if members are content, yeah. Okay, thank you. And then item 15 is the forward work programme. So page 484 you'll see the draft forward work programme, and I'm just seeking agreement that we proceed with the evidence sessions as set out in the draft forward work programme and to reflect any decisions taken today. Content? Okay, item 16 is any other business. Does anybody have any items of business that they want to raise? Look, I just want to say on behalf of the committee, thank you to our committee staff as we're obviously coming into recess. And thank them for all the work that they have done for us and all the help and support that they do provide to us. We do greatly
appreciated as members of the Committee for Infrastructure. I want to thank the DALO as well, and all at the department, including the officials, and if you could please pass that on, and pass on our thanks to the Minister in terms of engagement that we have with the committee and scrutinising obviously the things that come forward. Some of it we might not like, but that is our role as a committee. So I just want to place on record thank you also to Hansard too, who do record all of our evidence sessions. I think it's important that we do say thank you to them at this moment in time, and wish everybody a nice summer break, if that is at all possible. So members, the date, time and location of the next meeting will be at 10 a.m. on Wednesday the 10th of September here in room 29 Parliament Buildings. So thank you members, have a lovely summer, and we'll see you in September. Thank you.
And you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Committee Room 29. Sound.